Finally, won't they sack David Moyes? Well, no. The answer is no. They will not be sacking their manager. And I think that was expected. Reading the comments of our subscribers on YouTube over the last 24 hours, this is what we were expecting. Perhaps not hoping for, but certainly expecting. Little to no hope or faith in the board to sack David Moyes. But nevertheless, updates were required, and we got a couple today. The first one coming from The Athletic and The Telegraph reporting the same thing at the same time, which is David Moyes will be in charge of Saturday's game. We obviously face Nottingham Forest at the London Stadium, a big game, and they were reporting that Moyes will be given that one. Now usually, the one thing that's different, usually in the past when we get these updates, there is support. There's some support there for David Moyes. That's the man. Yeah, we're not sacking Moyes. He's our man. We're not sacking the manager. We've got full support in him. He's going to turn this round. If we were going to sack David Moyes, we'd employ David Moyes to replace David Moyes. He's the man we want. But there was none of that today. It was quite simple. It was quite straightforward. Moyes will get the game against Nottingham Forest, and that was it. The only justification given for this decision from the board was, despite the defeat yesterday against Tottenham, despite the performance, especially in the second half, despite dropping into the relegation zone, despite one win in 11, despite all those, the justification for keeping David Moyes beyond the Spurs game was performances have improved lately. Obviously referring to the win against Everton, the draws against Newcastle and Chelsea, the board feel that that's enough reason to give David Moyes a game against Nottingham Forest this weekend. Now this afternoon, the Times went one further with an update on that update, which was, if Nottingham Forest beat West Ham, David Moyes will be sacked. Now I got two problems with this. First of all, if they beat us, what about a draw? If you're going to give an ultimatum to the manager, at least give him a proper one. If you're going to heap all this pressure on your manager's shoulders by saying you've got one game to save your job, at least make it worthwhile. Say to him, you need to win or that's it, you're out. That's of course if this is true, but hypothetically if it's true, make it you need to win or you're gone. Not you need to avoid defeat. A draw and you're fine day. A draw and you're okay, you can keep on going. It's difficult now not to be looking at the fixture list, not just at West Ham, you're doing it with other teams as well. There's large parts of the season still to play. 15 games, it's a big portion, but it's difficult not to look at the fixtures and start thinking, right, where can we pick up these wins? And I know football's not played on paper, but it's hard not to do it. And you're looking at Forest at home, you're looking at Leeds and Southampton games thinking, well, we've got to win that, we've got to win that, we've got to win that. And somewhere we're going to have to win another game because that's possibly not going to be enough. But this Nottingham Forest game is a must-win on Saturday. Now, I don't really like labelling up games as a must-win this point in the season. It feels like there's still a lot of football to be played, but that's how I feel. That is a must-win on Saturday. So to turn around to your manager and say, you must not lose this weekend, and if you do, we're going to sack you, that's almost justifying a draw. You're almost forcing the manager to play for a draw at home to Nottingham Forest this weekend, because if you go for the win and end up losing, we're going to sack you. So you better make sure you don't lose this one. So if you're going to threaten him, if you're going to give him one game to save his job, at least make it worthwhile. At least make it win or you're out. But problem number two, and you know what I'm going to say here. If you've been a subscriber for long enough, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say here. What's the point? Well, point is all David Moyes needs. But what is the point in this? If you get to this point, which is to give your manager this ultimatum, you've already decided he's not good enough. What is the win? Let's just assume we won. What is the win against Forest going to do? If you've come into work today, the board that is, you've gone into work today and said we need to have a meeting, we need to decide the future of our manager. If you've got to do that, there's already problems. If you feel you've had to have a conversation with the other board members, you've had to reach out to people for a little bit of advice to say, what do you think we should do? Should we stick? And it won't be the first time you've done it. It's probably the third or fourth time this season you've had to do it. The last time you've done it was last month. You're doing it again and again and again. If you have to have the same conversation all the time, there's probably something in that. But forget that. Even if this was the first time you've had to do it, if you get to this point where you need to decide the future of your manager, bear in mind, all this time, Sullivan and co will have been fielding calls and emails from their I say the trusted journalists, the journalists that they built up relations with, they'll be getting phone calls from them saying, well, hang on, Mr. Sullivan, what are you doing with the managers? You got a job or what? And by the way, I'm going to be quoting you, so which is it? All day he would have been replying to people. He'd have had people asking him, what's happening with David Moyes? He can't ignore it. But if you get to the point where you have to decide the manager's got one game to go, you've already decided he's not really the long-term manager, haven't you? I just don't get it. It's the 3-game cycle. I know there's only one game here, but it's usually a 3-game cycle. And it's happened with every single manager at West Ham under this board. It happened with Pellegrini, it happened with Bilic, it happened with Allardyce. You can keep on going back. It's the same thing. You've got 3 games to save your job. Lose one, draw 1-1. All right, let's reset. Back to 3. We're back to 3. Let's continue going. I hate it. It's the worst thing there is, because it's just such uncertainty for everybody involved. It can be beneficial to David Moyes. You've got one game to save yourself, one game to save your job. That's not beneficial to him. It's not beneficial to the manager, to the players. Oh yeah, well, he's got one game, so he might be here next week, he might not. It kind of depends. Nobody wins off the back of this. I hate it. I absolutely hate this policy. I am all for supporting your manager and giving him as long as it takes. It's an admirable thing to do. They've done that. They have done it already. They've stuck by Moyes through thick and thin already. Giving him the job back, arguably, was doing that in the first place when he came back for a second tenure. But this season, they've stuck by Moyes. They have done. They've done their bit. But now, to give him one game, and this is assuming it's true, it might not be true, but I do actually believe it. And I do actually believe the wording of it as well, which is if West Ham lose, Moyes will get sacked. Because I do actually think if we draw, I'm not convinced he would get sacked. I think there's other things you have to take into consideration. I don't think it's as black and white as that. For example, what happens if we played him off the park? We get done over by VAR, we're very unlucky, we got a player sent off or something, and we deserve to win, but we only draw. Is you going to get sacked? Well, it's not quite the same as us playing like we did against Tottenham and coming away with a point. It's two completely different. It's the same result at the end, a point. I think other things get taken into consideration. I'm not saying it should do, but I think it will. But I do believe this report, which is, well, first of all, he will be here for us, but if he gets sacked, he will get sacked if we lose, and only if we lose. And I just think it's wild. Like I said, if you've got to this point that you are having to threaten him with one game to save his job, you've got to the point where you've accepted he's not good enough to be a manager. You've got to the point where you've decided he's not doing a good enough job and that you're probably going to have to replace him. Well, just replace him now. Get rid of him now. Give someone else the game. Even if it's just Kevin Keane for one game, just give it to him. Do something different. Because we can't afford to lose this game. Well, actually, that's worse than that. We can't afford to draw this game on Saturday. Now, obviously, it's better than losing. But my point is, if we lose and the reports are true, we would sack Moyes. But if we were to draw and he would remain here, what a waste of a game that. We can't afford to waste 2-3 points this weekend. We need a win on Saturday. And I just feel that this message, don't lose or you're sacked, I think it's the worst thing they could have possibly done this week, actually. I think they'd been better off coming out and saying he's the manager for the rest of the season. They might not have to mean it, but to come out and do that, I think is, in my view, because I hate this cycle thing so much. I absolutely detest it. I think it's better off to back your manager to the hilt than it is to say you've got one game. Because if this was true, if it's true, and Moyes has been told you lose, you're out. If he was to play for the draw on Saturday, well, yes, Moyes would get criticism, and correctly so. It's also the board as well for putting Moyes in this situation where, like I said, if you go for it and lose, you're out. But if you hang on and get a point, it's not good. It doesn't do anyone any good, but you're here for the next game. It's such an unhealthy position to be in. And while I wasn't expecting Moyes to get sacked, I'd have been shocked if they sacked David Moyes. I think I'm more surprised that they're giving him one game because it's just absolutely baffling. I can't get my head around it, and if someone out there has got the reason, logic as to why it's a good idea to give the manager one game and one game only, then please put in the comments, because I'm open to changing my mind on this. I want to hear the reasons for it, because I just don't I've never understood it, and that's a 3-game thing. But a 1-game thing is just, I don't see where you go from here. Even if we were to beat Nottingham Forest, say, let's say we beat Forest, and then we lose the next 2. We know what's going to be happening. International break. Oh well, after the international break, Moyes has got 1 game, or before you know it, you're out of time. We're already at the point where we know the best time to sack the manager, not West Ham, any Premier League club, the best time to sack the manager was before the World Cup. After that weekend when we got beat by Leicester, that was the prime time. So the new manager had 6 weeks. He had a mini pre-season. The next best time would have been, I would suggest, just before the January transfer window. So the new manager then has the January transfer window to make amends. We're no longer into when is the best time to sack your manager. They're gone. It is now. The question has changed now. It's more like, well, what is not the worst time to sack your manager? That makes sense. Well, the more time you can give the new manager, the better. There's 15 games at the minute. It's enough of the season. It's just short of half the season. It's long enough to implement ideas. It's long enough to influence a team between now and the end of the season. But if you were to kick another 3-4 games down the road like we're doing, you're asking somebody to come in with 10 games maybe. 10 games. It won't be enough. It will not be enough. We are playing with the board. The board are playing with fire. And I don't trust them. I've said this numerous times, well, from day one really, but even when we've been playing European football, I've said I don't just because we're doing well, just because Moyes was doing well, and he got us into European football, just because Moyes was performing well, I don't suddenly trust the board. Now, in fairness to them, they backed him in the summer. They spent a shed load of money. The money was there last January to go get a striker. We didn't. The board have done their bit financially, backing the manager over the last 12 to 18 months. They've done their bit. But just because they've got better at backing the manager doesn't mean they've got better at identifying managers or recruiting managers. I still don't trust them to A, get the right replacement, B, well, let me reverse that, A, identify the right replacement, and then B, go get him, but also C, do it at the right time. Because some people have said in the last day or so, this feels like the Avram Grant season, and today we discover that where we are now is exactly the same as what Avram Grant was in terms of points tally on the board. And you do just wonder, we're in the same situation with the manager. We know we tried to replace Avram Grant, we just couldn't get the manager we wanted in Michael O'Neill. Martin O'Neill. We couldn't get him. He didn't take the job because Avram Grant was still here. We cannot afford the same mistake again, which was sticking with Avram Grant because there was nobody else out there. And I'm worried that we're going to end up doing the same thing. But this one job, losing you're out. Tell you what, if we draw on Saturday, while it is on David Moyes, it's more on the board for putting David Moyes in a situation where a draw was enough to keep his job for at least another week. It's not good enough. Anyway, that's the updates. I'm going to disappear now. I'm back tomorrow with a different video. But if you've enjoyed this one, please do drop a like on it. Subscribe to New Hammers Chat. I'll catch you then.